When my daughter Melissa walked into the kitchen that morning, her voice carried a tremor that I hadn't heard since she was a child trying to confess something she knew would break my heart. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." I was standing by the sink rinsing my teacup, the same chipped porcelain cup I had used for years, the one her father had bought me at a flea market the summer before he passed away. For a moment, I didn't say anything. The sound of running water filled the silence like a slow confession. Melissa's eyes darted around the room, unable to meet mine. She looked like she was waiting for me to explode, to shout, to demand an explanation. But I just turned off the tap and dried my hands with the towel that hung from the oven handle. "You did what?" I asked, my voice calm but heavy. "I sold the beach house," she repeated, slower this time, as if saying it again might somehow make it sound less cruel. "We're leaving tomorrow morning. The buyers are taking possession in 2 days, and I need to be there to finalize everything." She spoke in that efficient, emotionless tone she always used when she wanted to appear in control, the same tone she used in business meetings and phone calls with her clients. But I could see through it. I always could. "You had no right to sell that house, Melissa." "It's mine," I said, finally turning to face her. "I had to, Mom. You don't understand. Things have gotten complicated. The firm is in trouble, and if I didn't make this sale, I could lose everything." She sat down at the table, avoiding my eyes, her perfectly manicured hands trembling slightly as she fiddled with the gold bracelet I had given her on her 30th birthday. "You could lose everything?" I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. "And what about me? What about the memories in that house? The summers your father built with his hands, the garden he planted, the porch we watched sunsets from?" "Mom, please," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "It's just a house." Just a house. The words cut deeper than she could imagine. For her, maybe it was just a property, a piece of real estate she could liquidate to solve her financial crisis. But for me, it was the last living part of her father. Every nail, every board, every stone in that place carried his fingerprints, his laughter, his dreams. "I didn't tell you sooner because I knew you'd try to stop me," she continued, her tone softening now that she'd released her secret. "But I need to do this, Mom. I need to take control of my life again. You've always told me that family is supposed to help each other in difficult times. Helping is not the same as taking," I said quietly. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock above the refrigerator ticked loudly, marking the seconds between us. Finally, she pushed the papers across the table toward me. "The documents are here. You just need to sign where I marked. The buyer's lawyer insisted you be the one to authorize the final transfer since your name is still on the deed." I stared at the folder, then at her face. Her eyes were tired, the faint traces of sleepless nights written beneath them. I knew she wasn't doing this out of cruelty. She was desperate. But desperation has a way of turning love into selfishness. "And if I refuse?" I asked. "Then the sale falls apart and I lose the deal that could save my company," she said, her voice small now, almost pleading. "Mom, please, this isn't just for me. It's for us." I smiled sadly. "For us, Melissa? The moment you decided to sell that house without telling me, it stopped being about us." She looked down at the papers again, her lips trembling. "You always talk about Dad like he's still here," she said suddenly, her tone sharper now. "But he's not, Mom. He's gone, and holding on to that house won't bring him back." "No," I said, my throat tightening, "but selling it won't bring him back either." She sighed and stood, pacing the room. "You don't understand how much pressure I'm under. The investors are threatening to pull out, and the bank won't extend the credit line. I had no choice." "There's always a choice," I whispered. She turned toward the window, blinking rapidly, her shoulders stiff. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, but instead she said, "We leave at dawn. Pack your things tonight. The buyers will be meeting us at the beach house tomorrow morning." She didn't wait for my response. She grabbed her purse and walked out, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. When the door closed behind her, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. I sat at the table, staring at the papers she had left. The name of the buyer jumped out at me in bold letters, Elias Whitmore. My heart stopped for a second. Elias. That name hadn't crossed my mind in decades, not since before Robert and I got married. What Melissa didn't know was that Elias Whitmore wasn't just some investor buying another seaside property. He was the man who had once broken my heart, and the man who had tried to buy that same house 40 years ago when Robert and I had first built it, and he was the reason I had sworn that no one outside our family would ever own it. I closed the folder carefully and stood up, my mind racing. Melissa thought she was saving her company. She had no idea she was walking into a trap, one that had been quietly waiting for decades. I looked out the window toward the dark horizon, where the faint outline of the sea could just be imagined beyond the hills. "You've picked the wrong man to sell my memories to, Elias," I whispered. Then I turned off the light and began to plan. Because what Melissa didn't know was that the beach house wasn't just a piece of property. It was also the key to a secret her father and I had buried long before she was born. A secret worth far more than any business deal could ever promise. And I wasn't about to let it fall into the wrong hands. The morning came too quietly, the kind of quiet that feels like a warning instead of peace. I woke before dawn, though I hadn't slept much at all. The house smelled faintly of dust and old memories, and for a brief second, I almost believed it was just another ordinary day before I remembered what was about to happen. I packed my suitcase slowly, deliberately, folding each item as if the rhythm of the act might calm my nerves. The papers Melissa had left still sat on the table where I'd placed them the night before. The ink of Elias Whitmore's name seemed darker now, as though the page itself remembered him too. Outside, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Melissa's car. She was early. I took one last look around the kitchen, tracing my fingers over the chipped counter edges, the faded wallpaper Robert had sworn he'd replace one day, the clock that had ticked faithfully through every argument and reconciliation. Then I picked up the folder and slid it into my bag. Whatever game Elias was playing, I intended to find out before the sun set. Melissa was already by the car when I stepped outside. She looked immaculate, of course, in her pressed beige coat and leather gloves, but her eyes were red. She'd been crying, though she'd never admit it. "You're ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. She opened the trunk for my bag, then walked around to the driver's side. I noticed her hand linger on the handle for a second longer than necessary, and I wondered if she was hesitating, if some small part of her wanted me to tell her to stop. But I said nothing. The drive to the coast took 3 hours. The roads were slick with morning mist, and the silence between us was thick and awkward. Every so often, Melissa would glance at me, open her mouth as if to speak, then change her mind. I stared out the window, watching the gray landscape pass by, the rows of empty fields, the distant silhouettes of barns, the way the sun struggled to break through the clouds. When the first glimpse of the sea appeared on the horizon, something in my chest tightened. The beach house stood at the far end of the cove, half hidden by dunes and wild grasses. Even from a distance, I could see that the years had been kind to it. Robert had built it to last, white cedar walls, blue shutters, a porch that faced the ocean, like an old friend. My heart ached as we pulled into the driveway. Melissa parked but didn't get out right away. "You okay?" she asked finally. "I'm fine," I lied. She nodded, then forced a smile. "The buyers will be here in an hour. I figured we could go through the house one last time, make sure everything's ready." One last time. The words felt like a small death. We stepped inside, and the familiar scent of salt and pine greeted us. Every corner of the place carried echoes of laughter and summer, and the hum of life. Melissa walked through briskly, checking things off on her phone, detached as always, while I wandered through the rooms like a ghost retracing her own footsteps. I paused by the mantel where Robert's photograph still sat, him in his fishing hat, smiling in that boyish way that used to melt me. "You'd hate this, wouldn't you?" I whispered. The floor creaked behind me. Melissa stood there watching. "Mom," she said softly, "you don't have to make this harder than it already is." I turned to her. "You think this is about difficulty? This is about trust, Melissa. You sold the one thing that kept this family together." She sighed. "I know you think I betrayed you, but I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," I said again, repeating the words from last night, "and you chose to sell this to him." Her brows furrowed. "Him? What are you talking about?" I took the folder from my bag and handed it to her, pointing at the buyer's name. Her face paled as she read it. "Elias Whitmore." "You know him?" "Better than you think," I said. She looked confused. "Mom, was he a friend of Dad's?" I let out a humorless laugh. "No, he wasn't a friend. He was a mistake I made before I ever met your father, and one I thought I'd buried long ago." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "that Elias has wanted this house for a very long time. Longer than you've been alive. And if he's back now, it's not for the reasons you think." "So you're saying he's dangerous?" she asked, half skeptical. "I'm saying," I replied, "that he doesn't buy things he can't use. He doesn't invest in property. He invests in secrets." Before she could question me further, a car door slammed outside. We both turned toward the window. A sleek black sedan had pulled up at the end of the driveway. The kind of car that didn't belong in a sleepy coastal town. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a tailored gray suit. Even from inside, I could see the unmistakable confidence in his posture, the slow, deliberate way he adjusted his cufflinks before walking toward the porch. Melissa exhaled shakily. "That's him," she whispered. "Elias Whitmore." I said nothing. My hands trembled slightly, but I hid them behind my back. When the knock came, Melissa opened the door. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, forcing her professional smile. "Please come in." Elias's eyes scanned the room before settling on me. For a moment, time folded in on itself. His hair was silver now, his face lined, but those eyes, sharp and knowing, hadn't changed at all. "Eleanor," he said softly, as though testing the name on his tongue. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," I said. Melissa looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. "You two know each other?" "We do," Elias said before I could answer. "Your mother and I go way back." "Apparently," I muttered. He smiled faintly. "I must say I didn't expect you to still have this place. You always were sentimental." "And you always were presumptuous," I replied. His eyes glinted with something unreadable. "May I take a look around?" "You already know what it looks like," I said. "You saw it 40 years ago." He chuckled softly, stepping past me. "Ah, but memories can fade. I like to refresh mine." Melissa gave me a look that said, "Please behave," but I barely noticed. My pulse was pounding. I followed Elias as he moved through the house, his gaze taking in every detail as though searching for something. And maybe he was. When he reached the study, he stopped by the old wooden cabinet Robert had built. He ran his fingers along its surface, almost reverently. Then he turned to me with a small smile. "Still keeping secrets in here, Eleanor?" he asked. My breath caught. "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, nothing," he said lightly, though his eyes told a different story. "Just that some houses remember more than people do." Then he walked away, leaving me standing there with the sound of the sea pressing against the windows and the sinking feeling that whatever Elias Whitmore wanted from my beach house, it wasn't just land or even money. It was something buried far deeper, something I thought I'd taken to my grave. The wind had begun to rise by the time Elias finished his inspection of the house, the ocean sending a low, restless hum through the windows like an old song. Melissa was still trying to keep the meeting civil, walking him through details about the sale and the transfer, though her voice trembled each time his attention drifted toward me. I stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, trying to read him the way I used to, through the small gestures, the careful pauses between his words. He hadn't changed much, not in the ways that mattered. His charm was still practiced, his politeness just polished enough to hide calculation. When Melissa handed him the final set of documents, he smiled and said, "Everything looks in order. All that's left is your mother's signature." I met his gaze steadily. "You've waited 40 years for this house, Elias. I'm curious. Why now?" His expression flickered for just a second. Then he said, "Because timing, Eleanor, is everything. And sometimes what was once forgotten becomes valuable again." I felt Melissa's confusion sharpen beside me. "Mr. Whitmore," she said cautiously, "if there's something about this sale that concerns my mother, perhaps we should discuss it openly." Elias's smile widened slightly. "Oh, I think your mother understands perfectly." He placed the folder on the table and looked around the room once more, then said almost to himself, "It's remarkable how little has changed. Even the air smells the same." "Leave the air out of this," I snapped. "It's not for sale." He chuckled softly, then turned to Melissa. "Would you mind giving your mother and me a few minutes alone? There are some details we need to revisit, old matters." Melissa hesitated, glancing at me. I gave her a small nod, though every instinct in me screamed not to let her go. "All right," she said. "I'll be outside making a few calls. Don't take too long. We still have to finalize before noon." When the door shut behind her, the sound of the waves filled the silence between us. Elias's demeanor changed instantly. The charm slipped, replaced by something colder, more deliberate. "Still the guardian, I see," he said quietly. "After all these years." "What do you want, Elias?" I asked. "You already know I'm not signing anything." He tilted his head. "You always were quick to see through things, but it's not the house I'm after, Eleanor. It's what your husband left behind in it." My blood ran cold. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" he said, stepping closer. "Robert and I were business partners once, remember? Before he met you. Before you convinced him to walk away from our project. That decision cost me everything, but he didn't walk away empty-handed, did he?" You're delusional, I said. Robert never owed you anything. He smiled faintly. I suppose that depends on how you define owe. You see, before you married him, Robert and I were working on something that could have changed our lives, something buried beneath this house, quite literally. He promised to share it, but after you came along, he vanished with it. You must have wondered why he built this place here, in this exact spot, so far from town. It wasn't for the view. I swallowed hard, my voice barely steady. You're talking nonsense. Elias's eyes gleamed. Am I? Then perhaps you can explain why the foundation of this house sits atop a sealed chamber, or why Robert received shipments of specialized metal containers months before construction began. I froze. He noticed. Ah, he said softly, so you didn't know. But I suspected that. Robert trusted you with his heart, not his work. He was sentimental that way. You're lying, I whispered, though part of me knew he wasn't. I remembered the nights Robert had come home late, smelling of salt and oil, claiming he'd been checking the supports by the shoreline. I'd believed him because I'd wanted to. Elias took another step closer. I don't need the house itself, Eleanor. I need what's under it. And since your daughter was so kind as to sell it to me, I'll soon have both. My hand clenched around the edge of the table. You'll never get it. I already have, he said. You think your signature matters? It doesn't. Melissa signed the binding agreement. The legalities are a formality. I just wanted to see your face when I took back what was mine. You don't know what you're unleashing, I said. Robert sealed whatever it was for a reason. Oh, I do, he replied, leaning close enough for me to smell his cologne, sharp and clinical. And that's exactly why I want it. Then he turned and walked toward the door, calm as a man leaving a dinner party. Before stepping outside, he said, I'll see you both at the lawyer's office in town this afternoon. Try not to change your mind too late. It's bad for business. When he was gone, I sank into the nearest chair, shaking. The storm outside had grown louder, the wind lashing against the windows as though trying to warn me. Robert's secrets, the ones I'd thought were buried with him, were stirring again. Melissa came back in moments later, frowning. Mom, what did he say? You look pale. I forced myself to steady my breathing. He's not buying this house for the reasons he told you, I said. He's after something else, something your father left behind. Dad? But he didn't own anything except this place. He owned ideas, Melissa, I said quietly, and some ideas are dangerous in the wrong hands. She shook her head. Mom, I think you're overreacting. He's just an investor. He's not... No, I said sharply. Listen to me. Elias Whitmore is not just an investor. He's a man who spent half a lifetime chasing what doesn't belong to him, and now you've handed him the key. She looked scared now, her confidence faltering. What do we do? I stood and walked toward the window, staring at the restless sea. We go to the cellar, I said. If Robert left something here, we're going to find it before Elias does. The cellar? Melissa repeated, incredulous. Mom, we've been down there 100 times. Not where I'm talking about, I said, turning to face her. There's another one, hidden. Your father told me never to open it unless I had no other choice. And this is that choice? She asked. Yes, I said, because by tomorrow, this house, and whatever's beneath it, might belong to a man who doesn't care what he destroys to get what he wants. Melissa hesitated, then nodded. Okay, she said, then let's find it. The wind howled louder as we made our way toward the narrow door that led to the basement. I flicked on the light and the stairs descended into shadow. For years I had avoided this place because it made me feel Robert's absence too keenly. Now, the air down there felt charged, alive, as if the house itself were holding its breath. As we stepped onto the cold concrete floor, Melissa whispered, Where do we start? I ran my fingers along the wall, remembering Robert's hands there, the way he'd worked with such quiet focus. And then, just beneath the old workbench, my fingertips found a faint seam, a square outline barely visible beneath layers of dust and paint. Here, I said, help me move this. Together we shifted the bench aside, revealing a hidden hatch bolted shut with iron latches. Melissa's eyes widened. Mom, what is this? I stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, Your father's other life. Melissa knelt beside the hatch, brushing away the dust that had gathered over decades. The bolts were rusted but intact, as though time itself had tried and failed to pry them open. This is insane, she murmured, glancing at me. Dad built a secret room under the house and never told anyone? I crouched down beside her, tracing the metal with trembling fingers. Your father was a brilliant man, but he carried burdens even I never fully understood. Whatever's down there, It's not just old papers or tools. He told me once, "If anyone ever finds the second door, tell them to think twice before turning the handle." Melissa frowned. "He actually said that?" "Word for word." We worked in silence for several minutes, the rhythmic clank of tools filling the air as I pried at the bolts with a rusted wrench. The storm outside rumbled, thunder rolling like distant drums. Each strike of lightning sent brief flashes of white through the small basement window, and making our shadows dance along the walls. Finally, one of the bolts gave way with a loud metallic snap. "There," Melissa said breathlessly. "One down." "Two more," I replied, my hands slick with sweat despite the cold. As we worked, memories flooded back. Robert's late-night phone calls, the locked drawers in his study, the time he came home with a small bruise on his temple and told me he'd slipped at the construction site. I'd believed him then, because love had made me blind. When the final bolt came loose, we both stepped back. The hatch creaked open just slightly, releasing a faint metallic scent, something like oil and sea air mixed together. Melissa leaned closer. "It's dark. I can't see anything." "Stay back," I warned. "We don't know what's down there." I fetched an old flashlight from the shelf and clicked it on. The beam pierced the darkness, revealing a narrow ladder descending into a small tunnel. The walls were reinforced with metal and concrete. This wasn't a simple cellar addition. It was built deliberately, professionally. "Mom," Melissa whispered, awe mingled with fear. "What was Dad doing?" "We're about to find out." I took the first step down, the wood creaking beneath my weight. The air grew colder, denser, the kind of cold that seeps through your clothes and into your bones. Melissa followed reluctantly, the flashlight trembling slightly in her hands. When we reached the bottom, we found ourselves in a low chamber, barely larger than a bedroom. In the center sat a steel chest bolted to the floor. Its surface was smooth except for a small engraved plate with Robert's initials, RHB. Melissa crouched beside it. "It's locked," she said. "Of course it is." I knelt beside her and examined the mechanism. It wasn't a simple padlock, it was a combination lock, the kind used in bank vaults. "He must have left the combination somewhere," Melissa said, frustration creeping into her voice. "But where?" I looked around the small room. Shelves lined the walls filled with old blueprints, tools, and notebooks, all neatly labeled in Robert's handwriting. One folder caught my eye, its corner marked with a faded ribbon. I pulled it free and opened it. Inside was a set of schematics for the house, but not as it had been built. These plans showed additional underground structures that were never completed. At the bottom of the page, Robert had scribbled a note. "The key is where the tide never touches, but the sea still sees." I frowned. "The tide never touches, but the sea still sees," I repeated aloud. Melissa looked puzzled. "What does that even mean?" "It sounds like a clue," I said. "Something near the beach, maybe on higher ground." Melissa groaned. "Mom, we don't have time for riddles. Elias is expecting us at noon." "And that's exactly why we need to solve this now," I said. "Whatever's in that chest might be the reason he wants this house." We climbed back up the ladder, sealing the hatch behind us. Outside, the storm had turned violent. The sea thrashed against the shore, and the rain fell in heavy sheets that blurred the horizon. I grabbed my raincoat from the hook by the door. "Come on," I said. "We're going to the cliffs." "Mom, it's dangerous," Melissa protested. "Then stay," I said firmly, "but I need to know what Robert meant." After a brief hesitation, she grabbed her coat and followed me into the storm. The wind howled around us, pulling at our clothes, pushing against every step we took. We made our way toward the northern edge of the property, where the rocks rose high above the waterline. This was where Robert used to sit on quiet evenings, sketching in his notebook while the waves crashed below. I remembered finding him there once, years ago, staring at the sea with an expression I couldn't read. "What are you thinking about?" I'd asked. "How easily the world hides its secrets," he'd replied, "and how easily we overlook them." Now, as I stood in that same spot, the memory felt like a whisper from the past. The rain stung my face, and the flashlight flickered as we searched the rocky ledge. Then Melissa pointed. "Mom, look!" Embedded in the rock, half covered with moss, was a small metal plate about the size of a hand mirror. It had corroded over time, but the engraving was still visible. RHB. Beneath it were 4 small dials, each marked with letters instead of numbers. "A code," Melissa said. "Do you know it?" I stared at it, mind racing through years of memories, birthdays, anniversaries, Robert's favorite words, and then it came to me. "Love," I whispered. "He always said it's the only key that opens everything." I turned the dials. LOVE. With a faint click, the plate lifted, revealing a small cavity beneath. Inside was a slip of paper sealed in plastic. I opened it carefully, shielding it from the rain. On it was a single line. For Eleanor, if you ever need to remember why we built this house. The answer is 1947. Melissa leaned closer. That must be the combination. I nodded. The year we met. We ran back toward the house, drenched but driven by adrenaline. When we reached the cellar again, the storm had grown deafening, the ocean pounding like a heartbeat against the shore. I knelt before the steel chest and spun the dials to 1947. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a heavy click, and the lid lifted slightly, releasing a hiss of cold air. Melissa held her breath as I opened it fully. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were several sealed metal canisters and a thick folder marked Project Seraphine. Melissa blinked. What is this? I carefully unfolded the top sheet. It was a series of calculations, diagrams, and maps. Robert's handwriting again. But the contents made no sense to me. He was working on something related to energy conversion, I murmured, scanning the notes. Hydrogen synthesis, coastal resonance. Melissa, this isn't just an engineering project. This looks military. Military, Melissa repeated. You mean... Before she could finish, the sound of footsteps echoed above us. Heavy, deliberate. The door creaked open and a beam of light cut through the darkness. Elias's voice followed, calm and cold. You really shouldn't have opened that, Eleanor. I froze. He was standing at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed against the stormlight. I was hoping to do this the easy way, he continued, descending slowly, but I see you've already done the hard part for me. Melissa stepped in front of the chest instinctively. You're trespassing, she said, her voice trembling. Get out, Elias smiled faintly. This is my property now, and that, he gestured toward the canisters, belongs to me. I rose to my feet, placing myself between him and the chest. You don't know what you're dealing with. Oh, I know exactly, he said. Robert called it Seraphine. I called it salvation. You mean weapon, I said bitterly. You think he built something to destroy? Elias stopped a few steps above us. Destroy. No, control. You see, Seraphine wasn't designed for war. It was designed for power. Infinite, renewable power drawn from the sea itself. And Robert, sentimental fool that he was, hid it because he didn't trust anyone to use it responsibly. He didn't trust you, I corrected. His jaw tightened. And now, after all these years, I have the chance to finish what we started. Over my dead body, I said quietly. That can be arranged, Elias replied, his tone almost casual. Then he reached inside his coat, and the metallic glint of a gun caught the light. The sight of the gun froze time itself. The storm outside roared louder, as if nature had chosen that moment to protest what was about to happen. And the air in the cellar thickened until breathing felt like swallowing glass. Melissa's breath hitched, but she didn't move. Her hand stayed on the steel chest, her eyes locked on Elias as though daring him to step closer. I raised a trembling hand. Elias, I said, my voice low but steady, think about what you're doing. Robert didn't hide Seraphine to spite you. He hid it because it wasn't ready, because it was dangerous. He descended another step, the gun unwavering. Dangerous, he echoed. Do you know what's dangerous, Eleanor? Letting the world burn while you keep salvation buried under your floorboards. Do you have any idea what this invention could have done? What it still can do? His eyes gleamed with a fervor I remembered from the past, the same glint that had once convinced investors to trust him, the same fever that had driven Robert away. Seraphine wasn't salvation, I said. It was temptation. You and Robert played with forces you didn't understand. On the contrary, he said softly, I understood perfectly. Robert was the one who lost faith. He lost faith in you, I said, taking a step forward. He saw what obsession does to a man. Elias tilted his head, almost pitying. And look where faithlessness got him, dead before he could see his work realized. He shifted the gun toward Melissa. Now step aside. No, she said, voice trembling but defiant. You'll have to shoot me first. For a fleeting instant, something like admiration flickered across his face. You have your mother's stubbornness, he said, and your father's ignorance. He lowered the gun slightly, not in mercy but calculation. You think I won't do it, but I've sacrificed too much to walk away now. Decades, Eleanor. Do you know what it's like to chase a ghost for 40 years? To wake up every day knowing someone stole your life's work? Robert didn't steal it, I said, my voice shaking now. He saved it from you. You're still trying to paint me as the villain, Elias sneered. Typical. You always did need to believe your husband was some kind of saint, but Robert and I were the same. The only difference is that I was willing to do what was necessary. Necessary, I repeated bitterly. You mean reckless. Elias took another step, the distance between us shrinking. I could feel Melissa tensing behind me. "Give me the canisters," he said, "now." "If you take them, you'll kill us all," I said. "You don't know how to control it." "And you do?" he shot back. "You're a widow clinging to ghosts." The storm thundered above us, shaking the old beams of the house. Water began to leak through the cracks, dripping down the walls in slow, deliberate patterns, like veins forming on stone. Melissa's eyes darted toward the chest. "Mom," she whispered, "the papers. There's something else." She was right. In the folder beneath the diagrams was another envelope, smaller, sealed with wax. I reached for it slowly, my movements deliberate so as not to startle Elias. I broke the seal and pulled out a note written in Robert's unmistakable script. "If Seraphine ever sees daylight again, remember that it doesn't run on science alone. It runs on conscience. Without the heart, the power will turn on its creator." I read the words aloud. Elias frowned. "What kind of nonsense is that?" "It's not nonsense," I said quietly. "It's a warning. A superstition," he said. "Robert always had a flair for melodrama. Now enough stalling." He leveled the gun again and stepped closer to the chest. That was when Melissa moved. In a blur of motion, she grabbed the heavy wrench from the workbench and swung it at his arm. The impact sent the gun clattering to the floor. Elias cried out, clutching his wrist, and I seized the chance to kick the weapon away. It skidded under a shelf, vanishing into the shadows. "Run!" I shouted, but Melissa didn't move. Elias recovered faster than I expected, lunging forward and grabbing her by the arm. "You little fool!" he snarled. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I grabbed a nearby crowbar and swung it, striking him across the shoulder. He stumbled back, but his grip on Melissa's wrist didn't break. "Let her go!" I screamed. He twisted, throwing me off balance. I hit the floor hard, pain shooting through my ribs. The flashlight rolled across the ground, casting wild, erratic beams. In one of those flashes, I saw Melissa sink her teeth into Elias's hand. He yelled and released her. She scrambled toward me, panting. "Mom, the canisters. What if we destroy them?" "We can't," I said, gasping for breath. "We don't know what's inside. If Robert was right, even a small rupture could—" I didn't finish. Elias had already turned toward the chest again, pulling out one of the sealed containers. It was small, the size of a paint can. But it hummed faintly in his hands, as if alive. "This is it," he said, his voice trembling with awe. "All these years, and it still works." "Put it down, Elias," I said. "You don't understand what it's doing." "You think I haven't studied his work?" he said, eyes wild now. "I recreated every formula, every fragment of data I could find. This device draws energy from the resonance between ocean currents and atmospheric ions. Infinite potential. Self-sustaining. The world could run forever on this. Or end in a heartbeat," I said. "Robert never finished stabilizing it." He didn't hear me. He was already turning the small dial on the canister. A low hum filled the room, growing louder, deeper, until the light bulb above us flickered violently. The storm outside seemed to respond. The wind screamed, the waves crashed harder, and the house shuddered under the force. "Elias, stop!" Melissa cried. "It's not stable." "He lied to you," Elias said, sweat beading on his forehead. "He lied to everyone, but I'll prove he was wrong." I could feel the air vibrating now, an invisible pulse building in rhythm with the ocean. Papers flew from the shelves. The canister glowed faintly blue, its surface rippling like liquid metal. "Mom!" Melissa shouted. "What do we do?" My mind raced. Robert's note, "Without the heart, the power will turn on its creator." "The heart," I whispered. "It needs balance, not control." I lunged forward, grabbing Elias's arm. The contact sent a jolt through me, the static energy stinging my skin. "Let it go, Elias," I shouted. "It's feeding on your will, your greed." "I can handle it," he screamed back. "I deserve this." The canister's hum turned into a shriek. Light burst from the seams, filling the cellar with blinding brilliance. Melissa pulled me back just as Elias stumbled, clutching the canister to his chest. For a split second I saw his face illuminated, ecstatic, terrified, utterly consumed. Then the light imploded, collapsing inward with a thunderous crack. When the glow faded, Elias was gone. The canister lay on the floor, smoking, its surface blackened. The air smelled of ozone and salt. Melissa and I stared at it in stunned silence, the storm still raging outside. "Mom," she whispered, "what just happened?" I could barely speak. "It took him," I said. "Seraphine took him." The lights flickered, and for an instant I thought I heard something. A faint voice, maybe his, carried on the wind. But when I turned toward the stairs, only the sound of rain answered. "We have to seal it," I said hoarsely. "Now, before it happens again." We worked in near silence, hauling the chest shut and securing the bolts as tightly as our trembling hands allowed. The air felt lighter once it was done, though the unease remained, coiled beneath the floorboards. When we finally emerged from the cellar, dawn was breaking. The storm had subsided, leaving behind a restless silver sea. Melissa stood beside me on the porch, soaked, shaking, but alive. "Do you think he's really gone?" she asked. I looked toward the horizon. "No one who chases power like that ever truly disappears," I said quietly. "But maybe, just maybe, he finally understands what Robert tried to protect." We watched the waves crash against the shore, their rhythm steady, eternal. Then, far out at sea, a faint blue light flickered beneath the surface, just for a moment, before vanishing into the depths. For 2 days, the wind refused to rest, as though the sea itself was struggling to swallow what had happened beneath our home. The air smelled of iron and salt, and every creak of the floorboards reminded me of Elias's last scream, of the light that had devoured him and left only silence behind. Melissa barely spoke. She moved through the house like a ghost, sweeping up shattered glass, wiping soot from the walls, fixing what she could. There was an exhaustion in her movements that no amount of sleep could cure. On the morning of the 3rd day, sunlight finally broke through, flooding the windows with a strange, tender gold. For the first time in years, the house felt warm again. I stood by the window, watching the tide roll in and out, and thought of Robert, of the way he used to hum when he worked, of his quiet smile when he said, "Some things, Ellie, are meant to stay hidden until the world is ready to understand them." Maybe this was what he'd meant. Melissa joined me, her hair still damp from the shower, her eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. "I can't stop thinking about him," she said softly. "Elias?" I asked. She nodded. "It doesn't make sense. One moment he was there and the next gone, just like that." "Power always takes its due," I said. "He thought he could master something that was never meant to be mastered." Melissa turned toward the sea. "Do you think Dad knew it would come to this?" "He hoped it wouldn't," I said. "That's why he built this place, to keep Seraphine buried. But maybe, deep down, he knew someone would come looking." We stood in silence for a while, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves. Then Melissa asked, "What do we do now?" I looked at the house, its peeling paint, its aging bones, the memories clinging to every corner. "We rebuild," I said. "Not just the house, ourselves. But first we make sure no one else finds what's down there." Her jaw tightened. "You mean bury it again?" "Deeper this time," I said, "and seal it for good." By afternoon, we were back in the cellar, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth. The chest still sat where we'd left it, bolted shut. We'd reinforced the hatch with steel plates and poured concrete over the seams, but it still felt alive beneath our feet, as if the house was holding its breath. "Mom," Melissa said suddenly, "should we destroy it instead?" I hesitated. "If we try, we might release whatever's left inside. You saw what it did to Elias. Some power doesn't vanish. It transforms. So we just leave it here?" "No," I said slowly. "We give it back." She looked confused. "To who?" "To the sea," I said. That night, under a sky bruised with stars, we hauled the chest through the narrow back path to the cliffs. The tide was low, but the waves still struck the rocks with steady fury, as if warning us to stay away. The chest was heavy, heavier than it had any right to be. Each step toward the edge felt like a negotiation with the past. "Are you sure about this?" Melissa asked, panting. "Once it's gone." "It should have been gone long ago," I said. "Robert didn't build Seraphine to be worshipped. He built it to be buried." Together we pushed it closer to the edge, the metal scraped against stone, leaving long scars that caught the moonlight. Melissa glanced at me. "If this thing really draws power from the sea, won't throwing it back just feed it?" "Maybe," I said. "But the ocean doesn't keep what it doesn't want. It buries what's too dangerous to hold." She nodded, though uncertainty clouded her face. We stood side by side, the wind whipping our clothes, salt stinging our lips. I placed a hand on the chest and whispered, "Robert, if you can hear me, forgive us. We're just trying to do what you couldn't." Then, with one final push, the chest slid over the edge and vanished into the darkness below. For a long time, nothing happened. Only the sound of the surf, the smell of rain, the hush of wind across stone. Then a faint pulse rose from the deep, a single resonant thrum that rippled through the air like a heartbeat. The water glowed faintly blue for a moment, then went still. The tide shifted, calmer than before. Melissa exhaled shakily. "Did we just make things worse?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's not ours to guard anymore." We stood there until the stars dimmed and the first light of dawn painted the sky. When we finally turned back, the house looked smaller somehow, humbler. We walked in silence, each lost in thought. Inside, we dried our clothes by the fire. Melissa curled up on the couch, exhaustion finally pulling her under. I sat beside her, listening to the crackle of the flames, the quiet rhythm of her breathing. My mind drifted through years, through laughter, arguments, letters, nights when Robert would pace the floorboards above the cellar, muttering equations under his breath. I thought of Elias, too. His ambition, his hunger, the way he'd looked just before Seraphine consumed him. In the end, they'd both been chasing the same thing, control. And maybe that was the tragedy, that neither could see that power and peace don't live in the same house. Outside, the sea was calm again. I rose and stepped onto the porch, letting the cool air wash over me. The horizon shimmered pink and gold, the waves sighing like a tired giant. Somewhere out there, beneath the water, Seraphine slept again. Maybe it would stay that way. Maybe it wouldn't. The world has a way of rediscovering what it's not ready for. Behind me, Melissa stirred. "Mom," she murmured, "are we really going tomorrow?" I turned toward her, the faintest smile breaking through the weariness. "Yes," I said, "we're going tomorrow." She nodded, half asleep. "But what about the house?" I looked around one last time. The walls that had heard so much, the windows that had watched the tides change. "The house has had its say," I whispered. When she drifted back to sleep, I walked to Robert's study. The smell of old books and sea air lingered there. On his desk sat a small wooden box I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a photograph, Robert, younger, standing beside Elias in front of the unfinished foundation of the house. On the back, Robert had written, "May those who come after us choose love over brilliance." I held it for a long time, feeling the weight of all that had happened. Then I placed it back, closed the box, and turned off the lamp. By the time morning came, the sky was clear, the sea gentle. We packed what little we still needed, clothes, photographs, the small things that hadn't been tainted by secrets. As we stood by the car, Melissa looked back at the house one last time. "Do you think anyone will ever find out?" she asked. "If they do," I said, "I hope they're wiser than we were." She smiled faintly, then climbed into the passenger seat. I took one last look at the beach house, the peeling paint, the cracked steps, the echo of Robert's laughter in the wind. "Goodbye," I whispered. The engine started, gravel crunching beneath the tires. As we drove away, the sea gleamed in the rearview mirror, endless and unknowable. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw that same faint blue light flicker beneath the waves again, but when I blinked, it was gone. Only sunlight remained, scattered across the water like a promise. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, some endings are really beginnings disguised as farewells.